And was not a deliberate segue into this, James. But before we get started, you're in a band. Maybe you could record us the intro music.
Do you know, maybe my guitar's over there. If I'd have known, I could have plugged it into an amp and I could have played a bit of Thin Lizzy to get us going. Next time. Next time.
Yeah, well that's it. That's it. Next time, because that's Sorry, I dropped the ball on that. I should have thought of that when we were talking before we came on. But look, folks, that's been a minute, and no one's come in from the waiting room. So, actually, no, there's a few people there. Never mind. So, thank you for joining us. Thank you for joining us, James, and everyone who's joined in. We hope you got the packs all right and everything. Gary has said "The Air That I Breathe" by the Hollies. That would be an interesting one, maybe more of an ironic one. Although there's the water of life, the air that I breathe. You know, there's got to be a whiskey connection in there somewhere. And there's J-Cambridge. So, folks, we'll get started. So, James, before we do start, thank you for joining us. Do you want to tell us a bit about yourself?
Yes, yeah. Well, thanks for having me. Very much looking forward to this evening. So my name's James Jeffery. As you know, I work at the Lakes Distillery. I'm a senior account manager at the Lakes Distillery. Been with the business around about 18 months or so now, but passion for whiskey from childhood, but that always sounds wrong. But yeah, a long time passionate about whiskey, or also was a whiskey blogger before I joined this business. So yeah, absolutely love and devoted to the category. So really excited to be able to come here, and it's nothing better than to be able to share our story, chat and drink along, especially on a Monday night. What a better night to have a few drinks, right? Because no one likes Mondays.
No, exactly. So what was the name of the blog, and do you still update it occasionally?
It was Birmingham Dram, because I was living in Birmingham at the time, but I have let it die because I felt like it was unprofessional for me to have opinions whilst also working at the distillery. So
people would be like, why is he not being critical of his own?
Exactly. I'll only say nice things about the lakes and bash everybody else. Of course not, but yeah.
No, that is the difficulty in the industry as a whole, when you're trying to, you want to be honest with your opinion, but you also want to be fair to brands as well, and especially with whiskey, with new brands. I don't know if I know you've only started in the role recently enough, but with the Lakes, I don't know if you found that when the whiskey was younger, and because you've obviously won a huge award this year with the world's best single malt, which just goes to show you that the liquid we're going to try tonight, I think, will speak for itself. But obviously, when a distillery starts and the spirit's young, people can expect a lot from a young spirit. Mm-hmm. So it is important to kind of give be understanding about where liquid is coming from. So do you want to give us a run through of the order we're going to go into today?
Absolutely, yes. So in terms of the plan for the evening, so you should have received 4 drams in your pack. We've got 2 blends and 2 single malts. So the first is this one here, which is the one Manzanilla cask finished. We'll then move on. Our second one will be the one Colheita cask. So if you want to get your drams ready. The third will be the Whiskymaker's Reserve number 5. So that's our sherry-led house-style single malt. And then your secret unrevealed dram. Probably a lot of you will have already guessed what this is now, because it was actually announced and released on Friday, is the Whiskymaker's Editions Infinity. So this is our brand new release, which is just available. So that's the order we'll go. We'll do Manzanilla, then Colheita, then number 5, and then your secret dram, which is Infinity.
No, that's fantastic. And we were, as you say, that the Infinity came out on Friday, and obviously when the sets were bottled, just for not to state the obvious, it was all hush hush, so we couldn't share it. So if you got the pack 3 weeks ago and was like, I wonder what that is, there you go. Marvelous. So I suppose we could get started. I don't see any reason why not to, unless anyone objects in the chat there. But
sounds good. First off, just a quick show of hands. How many of you guys know the Lakes? Have many of you tried the Lakes before? We've got a few people there who are fans or advocates. That's good. Some hands in the air. But hopefully there'll be a few new people who've not tried it, and this is a first experience for you. So very much hope that you'll enjoy what you get to try today. So without further ado, let's pour the first dram, and then I'll get on with my chit chat. But there's no good not having a dram in your hands. So this is the Manzanilla cask finish. So I'm going to pour. I've got the luxury of a full-size bottle, so I shall pour myself a little one. And I'm thankfully working from home today, so I'm able to enjoy this without having to worry about driving. So I'm going to get in and have a little nose.
some people when they're growing up have pictures of their favorite band or some racing car or supermodel on the wall, and you're working from home with a giant picture of a whiskey glass behind you. It's
absolutely. Actually, behind this is my CD collection, but nobody can see that, so it's fine. Yeah, so this is the One Fine Blend Manzanilla cask. I'll let you get in and have a little taste before I start talking a little bit about it. So you see, it's a very light whiskey. I'll talk a little bit about kind of flavor profiles and things in a minute. But first, I wanted to talk a little bit about what the One is. So for those of you who maybe don't know, so it's our blended whiskey portfolio. So it has our Lakes single malt whiskey at its heart, but we do buy a little bit of Speyside, and you'll notice a little bit of peat coming through. So there's a little bit of Islay in there. So you should just get, particularly on the back, just a subtle smokiness that will come through, and that comes from the Islay that we get in. The core expression is the One Fine Blend.
Sorry, James, I just want to clarify for Sir Lenny in the chat there. We're starting with the Manzanilla cask.
Yes.
Lenny, the one Manzanilla.
One Manzanilla, that's correct.
On you go.
So yeah, the One Fine Blend is our kind of house style for our blended whiskey. But what's critical for us is we do a lot of work with what we call our cask expressions. So a lot about what the culture and essence of the Lakes is the importance of wood in whiskey maturation. And actually, the way we're able to demonstrate that with our cask expressions is effectively taking exactly the same liquid and just playing with those casks to create entirely different tasting whiskies. So if we take, so this is the Manzanilla, and you can see the colour of that, and this is the one sherry, and exactly the same age, exactly the same liquid, but you can just see the colour difference there, and obviously that gives you an idea of just how important the wood is in terms of that maturation. So Manzanilla, I guess we'll start talking a little bit about that, because people know a lot about sherry cask whiskey. Everybody knows traditional sherry, and they think that colour of this, which I've talked about here. They're thinking Christmas cake flavours, dried fruits, all of those big autumnal flavours. Manzanilla is a sherry, but absolutely from the flavour profile is, for me, the completely opposite end of the spectrum. So Manzanilla is a very dry sherry, a bit like a kind of Fino. Typically not used to mature whiskey on a regular basis. There are some Manzanilla expressions out there, but not very common. Hence why we thought, well, let's have a bit of a go and have a bit of a play with that. So we typically put it in Manzanilla for 6 to 9 months to finish it. It's all natural colour, non-chill filtered, and bottled at 46.6%. So the Manzanilla, if you ever try Manzanilla sherry itself, it's very dry. It's very saline, loads of coastal influences. So when you go in, and what I like to actually drink this whiskey alongside a Manzanilla when I'm doing a tasting, because you really get the characteristic that comes through from the sherry, and you really help to appreciate it. But you can see it's very light in colour. It's very fresh, and I get loads of salty notes come through, so a real salinity in there, but also kind of citrusy, lemony flavours coming through. But there's a little bit of sweet honey and vanilla. I don't know what else anyone else have you got there. I see heather and honey, biscuity on the palate. Yes.
Yeah, we got some fantastic tasting notes in there with Duncan says heather and honey on the nose, biscuity in the palate with more honey, dry sherry finish. Alan says much nicer with a few drops of water, salty, yes. Craig has said a summer dram marmalade, is said Paul, which is an interesting one. I do like the sherry influence on Lakes Whisky, says Adam. I'm not a strong peaty whiskey fan. Chewy marmalade, says Paul. So marmalade's come up a couple of times, and that's interesting. I must say I'm a complete nerd, so I love Manzanilla sherry. Manzanilla and Palo Cortado are my two favorite styles of sherry. As you say, it has that saline saltiness to it, which is kind of less nutty than some of the other drier sherries you can get, and that really does come through. But can you just expand a bit on that, the provenance of some of the whiskies? You were talking about Islay influence and that a second ago.
Yes, so I mean, I can't say from exactly which distilleries we buy from, but yeah, we do have some grain. We do buy from one specific Islay and one specific Speyside distillery, all blended by Davils, our master blender, but very much got our single malt at its heart. But I can't tell any more of the secrets as to exactly where they come from, I'm afraid. But
no, fair enough.
I saw someone said it was kind of a summery dram, I think, or what did someone say before? Yeah. And I think that really hits the nail on the head. It's really light, it's really approachable. It's great for the summer. It's also really mixable. So there's I know some people that's absolute sacrilege with a whiskey, but there's a famous mixed drink from the Jerez region called a rebujito, where they'll take a Manzanilla sherry and they'll add lemonade to it. Great twist on this. I'll take this and I'll use they've got a Fever Tree Mexican lime soda and maybe a little bit of lime and mint, and just make a nice long tall mixed drink. You know, when you don't want like a gin and tonic on a hot day, you want something a little bit different. For me, throughout the summer on a Friday night, that was my go-to drink. I'd make myself a rebujito with the one Manzanilla, and it was so refreshing and light and really delicious. So if you do want to kind of experiment with mixed drinks with it, I think that works really well, because it's really, really summery.
I could definitely see that working. Martin says, on the palate, peppery, zesty, orange, salty, some oakiness, dry to the taste, caramel, apple Betty on the nose, says Ian. I'm also getting peaches and apricots on the nose, says Kevin White. Greg says, what is the split between Speyside and Islay in this? Do you have a...
I don't have an exact amount, but the Islay influence is very low. It really is just to give you that subtle bit of warmth, that little bit of kind of almost pepperiness, rather than a kind of direct peat hit. So yeah, it's just to balance those flavors out and just give a little bit of peat come through.
And Adam has said, I imagine it would work well with a highball with soda, and it definitely could. I mean, this is a slight digression, but I used to love making like a gin martini, but instead of a dry vermouth, using Manzanilla as your and it really it can really work.
Do you know, I might have to try that, because I have all the ingredients to make that in the house, and my wife loves a good martini. So yeah, I think that's definitely going to happen this Friday. So yeah, good tip.
Marvelous. Rosie says, whiskey are we on? Could not connect. So Rosie, we are on the Manzanilla to start with. So this is Manzanilla 1, the first one. Yeah. We haven't. We're tasting the first one. So you haven't missed anything. So this whiskey is £49 on the website, and everyone joining tonight will get a 15% off that. So definitely one to use. I think that's a quite a good for a complex dram that's definitely drinkable on its own, but could easily go into a mixed drink. I think that's not a bad price point. We love to hear what everyone thinks. We've got a couple more tasting notes there as well. Martin says, lingering peppery finish with distinct saltiness, tiny hint of smoke which comes through for me right at the end. I do like the subtlety of the peat smoke, which is also what Reverend Kevin Wright says. The subtle peat, not in your face, and it definitely, that kind of wisp that just kind of creeps up with the finish. It's quite nice. I think people who aren't into peat whiskey could definitely drink this. And Adam agrees with him there.
Totally agree. And for me, absolutely, it's on the end. You don't get it straight away on the palate. It's very much on the finish. Just gets that little subtle hint of smoke, which I think works really, really nice. Absolutely. And it's just an interesting whiskey. I think what I like about this is it's just a little bit different. I've done quite a few whiskey shows, and there've been a few people who've said, their favorite one of the night that they've tried has perhaps been our number 5 or whatever, but they've gone away and bought this because it's quite approachable, but also quite different and a little bit unique. So yeah, I think it's great just because it's just a little bit different.
I'd say it's a good one for gifting for that same reason. I went and stayed with some cousins down in England recently, and I forgot to bring them something. So when I was driving down south from Scotland, I passed through Carlisle and I stopped off in the service station that had a whole section of your products. And
excellent. I know the one.
I bought them the your gin in the end. But this would definitely go for something like that, because it's obviously not your bog standard, not too expensive, not your bog standard whiskey, but it's it's someone who's new to whiskey, who don't know what they drink. They're not going to find this offensive. It's a bit different. I think that's not bad. And iPad 10 agrees. Marmalade, peppery finish, a pleasant drink, easy to drink. Yeah. So yeah, I say I'll make that point to reiterate Craig's point about it, great for newcomers to whiskey there. So that's good as well, Craig.
No, I agree. No, brilliant. Well, I'm glad you guys have enjoyed it, and also it's great to see that the kind of tasting notes aren't a million miles away from mine. That's always encourageable. But yeah, brilliant, excellent.
So the next one we're coming on to is the Colheita, is it?
Colheita, yes. So next one we're moving on to, I'll crack open my bottle, is the one Colheita cask finish. I mean, I think the colour of this is amazing. I absolutely love it. I mean, I'm a sucker for port finishes anyway, but what I like about this is it's much more subtle than your average port finished whiskey. We have a one fine blend port finish, which is all the normal kind of porty flavors that I absolutely adore. Big black forest gatto, dark chocolate and cherries, where This is far more subtle. It's way lighter. It's, for me, I get loads of nice kind of peachy notes, apricots. Again, it's quite a summer dram. Lots of stone fruits, but also a really sweet vanilla. I think this is probably one of our most approachable whiskies, personally.
Definitely. While people are sipping that and coming up with their tasting notes, Alan has asked age statements on the first one. Do we have a rough idea of the age of the whiskey that's gone into it before we dive right into this one?
We don't declare our age statement on any of our whiskey, but needless to say, our distillery was only founded in 2011. So in terms of the Lakes single malt that's in there, we started distilling our whiskey in 2013. So there'll be nothing older than that in there. But yeah, we don't actually declare any more on that. I love some of these notes here on plums and strawberries. Yeah, absolutely.
Cream, yeah.
Super sweet. It's a really sweet whiskey, really sweet, without it being saccharine, because you still get that little hint of peat because the Isla's still there.
And Leah said here for my point about the thing, can you buy it in Scotland? A bit of a drive to go to Carlisle to get a bottle. The whiskyshop.com and most of the whiskey, we have a whiskey shop in Inverness, Fort William, Oban, Edinburgh, Glasgow. If they don't have it in stock, they'll be able to get it in for you. So don't worry, Lee, we'll have you covered in Scotland.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so peaches and cream, yeah, plums come in there, strawberries on the nose, peach, apricot, vanilla on the nose. I've got honey and vanilla on the nose, hint of raspberry as well. It is very, very fruit forward. And as you say, that kind of pink hue in the color is always gorgeous.
Yeah, it's a beautiful color. It's a beautiful flavor. I find it's really quite mouth coating as well. It's quite rich because it's quite sweet. It very much feels like a dessert whiskey in terms of its sweetness. Yeah. And I think it's really, really approachable. Really, really easy drinking.
Yeah. I get cinnamon on a touch of cinnamon spice on the finish there, Adam. So I agree with you there. The texture is very different to the first one as well.
Isn't it?
Which silky mouthfeel is coming there. Honey and apricot cigar. That's a cigar I wouldn't mind having.
That sounds wonderful. Yeah, no, I think you're right. And actually, the mouthfeel being very different, and essentially, it's exactly the same spirit that goes into it. Just reiterates the importance of wood, and it's a message that I know. Obviously, in this room, you guys are very knowledgeable about your whiskey. But when we're speaking to people who maybe are first timers or approaching whiskey, actually helping them appreciate just how much flavor you get from your cask and the massive influence of that. And part of that education is with our one fine blend is just getting that story of the wood across. Really, really important.
No, fantastic.
I like that. Nice over ice cream. I like that, Ian. Yeah, I think that could work really well on a vanilla ice cream. Yeah.
Alan says a new type of cask for me, like this one, very soft and fruity. So very good.
So if you don't know about Colheita, it is a type of tawny port, and it comes with grapes from a single vintage. I think if I remember rightly, Colheita literally means I think it means vintage in Portuguese, does it not?
They were meant to. I don't know. This could be a bit of out of date information, but I think, or maybe I'm totally wrong, but you declare a vintage. It's like, this is so good, and you then have that 1 year rather than any kind of blending it. But
exactly, yes.
There was some bodegas recently in Portugal who've declared Colheita years like every year for the past 15 years. So people it's losing its uniqueness.
Yeah, it very much used to be a stamp of quality, which is becoming less so now. Absolutely.
Or maybe all the port is just getting better, James.
Quite possibly, yes. I mean, I do love a good port. I do. Yeah. Well, hopefully you've enjoyed this. It's been an enjoyable dram.
Definitely. Martin says milk chocolate right at the end, creamy berry finish with a touch of cinnamon. Now, I know before we move on from this, James, you place a big thing at the distillery on the provenance of the casks and the relationships you built. Is there, say, for example, for the Manzanilla or for this port, is there a particular bodega that you deal with, or?
Yeah, so we have very close and exclusive connections with one specific Spanish bodega. Don't ask me the name because I can't remember just off the top of my head. But yeah, so our Whiskymaker Davil is regularly out there, and actually it's part of our whole holistic whiskey making process. So a very hand in glove relationship between us and them in terms of I think with a lot of distilleries, they'll be buying casks on the open market, and they'll be just kind of buying what they need for when they need it. There's very much an established process of starting with the end in mind. So our whiskey making team will be out with a bodega saying, actually, this is the type of wood we want you to use. This is the type of seasoning and for how long, because they're aware of what kind of whiskey they're wanting to make in 5, 7, 10 years time. So for us, that's absolutely critical to everything we do. So that relationship with the bodegas, because as I say, majority of our wood is Spanish oak, majority is sherry seasoned. So it's so important for us that that they almost feel like an extension to our business.
No, fantastic. So the if we were to source support to pair with this, is there a particular bodega you'd recommend for that one?
Is it what? Sorry, a particular.
If we were to source support to share to go with the whiskey, in terms of the styles, but
quite possibly my port knowledge isn't quite so. I could have done more on the sherry, but my port knowledge isn't quite as good. So yeah. Fair enough.
Yeah. There's some great comments coming in there. Someone says I get Seville oranges at the end, says Craig, which is great. Reverend Kevin Wright says, as an Isla drinker, I like the subtle peat and the aftertaste. Rosie says, I'm getting a touch of warm spice in the finish. I can see the warm peaches, warm white chocolate. Lots of warmth there. Paul says, a really different nose to any whiskey I've had before, and I've had a lot. iPad 10 says, this is not as sweet as some port finish drams, a pleasant change. I think that's a key component, because it's got a lot of those berry fruit flavors that people are commenting on are clearly coming from the port influence, but it's not kind of your run-of-the-mill port finish whiskey, which seems to be the thing to kind of churn out recently. There seems to be loads of port whiskies on the market, but this does have a uniqueness to it.
No, it does. I mean, I literally, you could put the world's worst whiskey in a port cask and I'll probably like it, to be quite honest. I'm a sucker for port and red wine finishes in all my whiskies, but yeah, I think it's a much more subtle mix, and it gives you those kind of stone fruit characteristics rather than those big berry flavors and kind of cherries, which I quite like. It gives it a much more subtle approach, which is it's more approachable. Again, it's far easier drinking and less polarizing than maybe some port cask finishes.
It's funny. I was my job before working with the whiskey shop was involved working with a bar in Ireland that had the world's largest collection of Irish whiskey, one of the largest collections of whiskey in the world, about 1,500 different whiskies.
Oh, wow.
And about 6 years ago, someone quite prominent in the Irish whiskey industry, I won't name names, came into the bar, and there was this bar whiskey I used to love called Palace Bar. It was an independent bottling by the Palace Bar in Dublin. It's Palace Bar 12-year-old, and it was a port cask finish. At the time, we went through all the whiskies. I think there was 2 port cask whiskies out of 1,500 whiskies. Now, this is about 700 Irish, and then the rest was Scotch, bourbon, Japanese. This was around 2016, 17, and you just couldn't get a port cask whiskey. And this prominent person who came in, I was saying, oh, it's really weird that this Palace Bar whiskey is lovely. Why don't people do more port cask finishes? This person says, because all whiskies that go into port casks are crap. That's why distilleries don't make them. And it's just crazy that 6 years later, there's so many. Not only there's so many port cask finishes, but so many ones that are like this quality. It's amazing how much trends in the industry can change, and how, particularly recently, the desire to find new casks to experiment with and mark yourselves out as unique in the market has really paid dividends with whiskies like this, and obviously the Manzanilla one as well, which is a type of finish you wouldn't have gotten a couple of years.
I totally agree. I look back at when I was drinking whiskey, or when I was first blogging, and actually, I went to a bloggers meet and I brought an amazing port cask whiskey. And people are, oh, that's interesting. Port cask, that's something a little bit different. We've not had that. And the flavor profile is very different. And like you say, now the world is littered with different cask finishes, which is only good for the industry. What I love about where we're at as a whiskey industry now is there's an excitement and need for experimentation like we've not seen before. And I think that can only be beneficial, because we can only enjoy a greater breadth, and that we'll find more and more drams for different people or for different occasions. This is great in the summer. I probably wouldn't have this in front of a fire, but maybe I'll have our sherry cask finish in front of a fire in autumn. So I think it's only a good thing. And the more people we can get drinking whiskey, whichever distillery and whatever finish it is, it's got to be a good thing.
No, 100%. And we got some good advice from Reverend Kevin White there. So just add a drop of water and it's dull the taste, does not recommend. And Martin says, would you advocate a couple of drops of water? I've added a couple and it's made no real difference. And Paul says drop of water makes it more chewy. So I think maybe we'll stay off the water on this one. Adam says I usually have ice in a larger glass and find the flavor does open up by the time I get through it. So that's interesting. It's gone, says Rosie. I didn't get to add water. So yeah.
I always find the to add water or to not add water question absolutely fascinating. It does completely change and open up the whiskey or do different things. Our whiskies are at all kinds of different ABVs as the whiskey making team consider that for what they believe is the optimum ABV for the dilution is exactly right for them. They've already added their water to where they believe is perfect. But for me, it's totally up to everyone's flavour. I would never add whiskey to this. I'd never add water to this. I think it's perfect as it is, and 46.6 feels about right. With a couple of our others, I might choose to do so. But yeah, for me, what's great is have a little bit of play with it and find your kind of happy place. Yeah,
big time. And it's interesting. Adam's one on ice is definitely an interesting one. I mean, I actually, and given the right circumstances, I don't mind ice and whiskey. I'm not one of these Puritans, but as Rosie says, no ice, baby. But for tasting like this, just personally, this is not telling anyone what to do. I don't do it just because once you chill a whiskey, it dulls those flavors. So as Adam says, that I usually have ice in a larger glass, and the flavor does open up by the time I get through it. I suppose it's probably opening up as well because it's heating up, I suppose, And Craig says use whiskey stones. I suppose that way you can chill and control the dilution. My worry about whiskey stones is how well and often do people clean them, all that back going in and out of the freezer. But there you go.
I like Kevin's advice. It's like putting salt on your food, always taste it first. I think that's absolutely spot on. It's to add to taste, depending upon what you want, and there's no right or wrong. So yeah, taste it first, maybe add a few drops, and then you can decide the rest of your bottle whether it's adding water or not adding water, and also depending on your mood as well. I change. Some I might put a drop in. Some other days I'll be like, no, I want this straight. Definitely.
No, totally agree. So before we move on to the next one, the one signifies, maybe I'm totally wrong here, but the one, just to clarify, the one signifies the fact that it's a blend that's not necessarily involving all your own stuff. Yeah, and that was one of your earliest releases. Was the when you first opened was the one which was all third-party stock. Am I right?
Yeah, so our original release of the one was the concept was it was the one British, so it was buying stock from the total of the British Isles. There's some Welsh, English, Scottish, and Irish in there, and we've kind of stuck with the name, and we've kind of it's evolved to become the One Fine Blended Whiskey. But yeah, this is the umbrella term for our blended whiskey. Yeah.
So what Irish whiskey did you use?
Do you know, I'll be honest, I have absolutely no idea. It's before my time, and we tend not to talk too much about our old product. It wasn't quite to the quality that we've got to today. So yeah, if you've got any of that, drink it quickly, put it in mixed drinks, and then go out and buy some of the new stuff.
Marvelous. So I suppose might be no better time now to then move to the Whiskymaker's number 5, which I think is all your own malt.
Indeed, yeah. So we're on to the really good stuff now. So yeah, this is Whiskymaker's Reserve number 5, which I now get excited. It's a wonderful dram. So for those of you who aren't aware, I feel like I have to say this whenever I speak to people about the Lakes Distillery. Whiskymaker Reserve number 4 did win. Just got the little world's best single malt plaque here. Just got to have it behind me at all times. Something we're a young English distillery, and we didn't expect to win this, so we're incredibly proud. And we know that the liquid's good, and it's great to get similar feedback and kind of advocation of the hard work that the Whiskymaker team have put in. So really pleased. But yeah, this is our signature house style single malt. So you can see just from the colour in the glass, we know this is big. It's sherry led. Oloroso forms the backbone of it. There is some PX influence in here and a little bit of red wine, which just gives it a nice kind of fizzy spiciness. It's big, it's bold, it's dead fruity. It's great. It's really nutty, incredibly chewy, but it's also really creamy, but not kind of sweet cream, more kind of clotted cream flavors kind of coating your mouth. little bit, there's all the kind of normal kind of big Christmas cakey type flavors you would expect from a sherry led whiskey, but also kind of a bitterness, almost of a kind of coffee I get in there. And yeah, I find it really nutty, kind of almonds, macadamias. And there's so much on the nose. Yeah.
It's incredibly complex. We've already got some great tasting notes in there. There was a question as well about the Colheita cask. It's on the website for £45. That's before your 15% discount you'll get at the end of this tasting. Adam Ribena, says Paul, nuts and pastry on the palate. Jay says, I'm getting molasses, red wine, and nut ice cream flavor, like nutty flavored ice cream. That's a really good tasting note. Maybe even a nougat kind of ice cream. Yeah. The taste also reminds me of a rye whiskey. I suppose, yeah, that kind of nutty spice as well in there. Smells like dark chocolate and coffee. Spicy, says Craig. Lovely nose, fruitcake, apple, fruit and nut chocolate. Spicy like rye. That's got a really rich nose, warming apricot, so much going on. Ribena concentrate, says Paul. Blackcurrant, roasted nuts. So yeah, it's a.
I'm really enjoying these notes. I've always the nuttiness has always come through really strong. That rich kind of these Ribena blackcurrant notes. I'd never picked it up, but all of these, I've gone back after you said that. I'm like, yeah, I absolutely get that kind of concentrated Ribena. I've never got it. I love it. That's brilliant.
It's a testament to the quality of a whiskey like this and the complexity of it, that you can have so many varied tasting notes there, and none of them you're kind of like, no, I don't see that. You can all kind of see, oh, I can see that. Whereas compared to the first two, which are both very good whiskies and very unique, the tasting notes were very kind of homogenous. You know, they were kind of in the same ballpark. This is kind of really spanned the spectrum from fruity to spicy to nutty.
And I think a lot of that comes through. So the way that our process for cask management is quite unique in the Lakes. I believe we're the only whiskey distillery that uses process called élevage, which we borrowed from the cognac industry. So if you think your typical way of, kind of manufacturing whiskey, you'll take your new make spirit, you'll think, I'm going to put this in a sherry cask for 12 years and then disgorge it at the end of it. Try it every now and then, make sure everything's kind of going along as planned. With us at the Lakes, have a very, what we call a kind of active process of cask management, where we're constantly changing, tasting, disgorging, and moving that liquid around casks, which is what gives you those layers of flavour. So the whiskey making team are going on, they've got that end in mind, they know where they want to be going with this particular whiskey, and they're looking at how we can use casks to build those layers up, whether that's, they're now thinking actually it's been in a sherry cask for a period of time. Maybe we need to create a little bit of kind of cherry sort of flavor. So we'll maybe move it to a port cask. Maybe it's a bit too active. We'll move it to a more passive cask. So the whole concept is it's very labor intensive. It's very expensive, but actually helps you create those, like you say, all of those various different flavors that people are calling out. And that's entirely coming from that élevage process, which gives you that real breadth.
No, it does, and I was very impressed. I visited we for those who don't know, the W Club members can visit the Lakes Distillery with 30% off a tour, or is it 20% off? It's on the website. I can't remember if the percentage is right. So definitely make use of that, folks, if you're in the area, because and for our most recent issue of Whiskeria, I visited and wrote an article on it. So maybe I don't know if any of you have wasted your time reading that, but it's I was really blown away by when I had read and heard about the élevage and this kind of kind of progressive cask management system. I kind of thought, yeah, look, this is marketing speak, but when you're there and you see it in action and met some of the team kind of testing samples and stuff, I was kind of like, wow, this is actually not this isn't just a marketing tool. There's something really unique going on here. And as you say, I can appreciate the kind of the evaporation through disgorging, the labor costs, that it is an expensive process. So you have to really be committed, like Pep Guardiola or Bielsa, in terms of your fanaticism towards the whiskey to really want to see it turn out. And it definitely shows in a whiskey like this.
No, that's great. I mean, you're right. I mean, the amount of people we have in our warehouse versus the majority of distilleries of a similar size, it's this to this because of that active cash management. And I look at the whiskey making team spreadsheets and they're insane. They're absolutely insane in terms of the tasting profiles, and they're in there in the blending studio and going, right, now this needs to move here to here to here to here in order to create that flavor profile. And it's not, as I say, it's very active. You know, you might start with a concept of where you want to go and therefore what casks you want to move to, but it's constantly tasting throughout of that. And actually they might find this is where we thought we were going to go, but actually what we need to do now is go here. So that real explicit understanding and love of the casks really helps them to understand and build those flavors, but also to be able to be reactive, because the spirit and the casks are always doing different things to what the whiskey making team think it's going to do. So they just have to be able to be nimble and create those flavors in whatever way they need to.
No, big time. And I'm just going to come to some of these excellent tasting notes. So grape skins is one of them. Reverend Kevin Wright says, on the tongue, I'm getting creamy nuts, perhaps cashews or Brazilians. It's really nice. Sugarcane, caramel, again, silky mouth feel, hint of spice. Spiced carrot cake on the mouth. Spiced carrot cake might be my tasting note of the night. I think that's fantastic.
I like that. That's good.
And totally, when you taste it, you definitely, I can get that. Really superb dram. Love the breadth of flavors. Dark chocolate, sweet but sweet, not bitter. Spice and brown sugars on the finish. Heather and lavender on the finish. Maybe lavender, I'm not sure. Almost like a Cadbury's fruit and nut bar. Oily mouthfeel, ripe fruits. For me, the warmth means you could use it instead of a brandy at the end of a meal. 100%. I mean, you should be using whiskey as a digestif anyway, Craig. Yeah. I'm getting the black fruit and nutty chocolate, perhaps walnuts. On the palate, smooth roasted nuts, fruitcake, sugared almonds, dark chocolate, peaches, and a little bit of spiciness. Very like brandy once you add water. I can definitely see the brandy, or even like a really aged Calvados. Yes. How many types of casks do you use to make this one, says Alan? Do you know how many casks this went through, James?
I don't, because of the élevage process and the way that we manage that, it will be considerable. It won't be one or two. It will be multiple casks, and then a vatting of those various different casks as well. So we're talking, you know, in the tens rather than in the ones or twos. So yeah, significant amount. Because even when you say it's Oloroso, PX, and red wine, it's not just those three. There'll be hints of bourbon in there. There'll have been all kinds of different bits that they've been playing around with in order to create that. So yeah, significant. You know, I could get the spreadsheet, but it won't make for easy reading.
No, fair enough. Rosie says, I'm getting in my car now, but Rosie also said she finished off the Colheita too quickly to add water. So I would not recommend getting in a car, Rosie.
Terrible idea.
Brandy is a good analogy. Great after dinner whiskey, says Paul. Visited distillery a few years back. The whiskey has improved, says Roger. But just a few more drops of water makes it much smoother. I drink this around a roaring fire at Christmas as the grandchildren open their presents. Now that's a scene, Martin.
I like that. That sounds like a lovely image. I'm there with you. Yeah.
Brilliant. Yeah, and Adam's the same here, Rogers. He's also got a Whiskymaker Reserve 1 to 5 saved and unopened. So well, there you go.
I would never advocate not opening whiskey, but number one might be worth a bob or two now. So yeah. But try it. One is amazing. And actually, we should talk a bit about the journey. So, you know, yes, there are different numbers. So they're an evolution rather than a revolution. And I think if you tried number 1 and 2, they were very much a calling card. You know, they were bottled at 60-something%. They were big, they were bold, they were in your face. They were like, we're here, we're big, we're sherried, we're complex. And actually, as we've moved through to become more nuanced, you know, number 3 is a little bit more subtle, but a little bit polarizing. 4, you know, I think was very easy drinking. I think 5 for me is almost, we've grown up now. We've properly found our feet. This is slightly more subtle. It's a little bit more nuanced. And for me, I think 5 is my favorite. If I think about my, you know, what order preference I go, I probably go 5, 4, 1, 2, 3, probably, in my own personal opinion. So yeah, I find 5 really approachable, but it's been great to see how we've evolved, but you can still detect that Whiskymaker Reserve DNA. Whereas the additions are very much those diversions. You know, you can taste all 5 and they make sense.
Ian said, just think of how good 6 will be.
You might have to wait too long.
No, so this one came out early this year. So yes. Is that the idea? Is the next one going to be early next year as well? Or is it going to be before Christmas?
It won't be before Christmas. It will be at some point next year. So yeah, the plan will be for at some point next year for number 6 to arrive. So yeah, I understand it's either been bottled or won't be long till it's bottled now. So yes, it won't be too long to wait.
And Adam said this is really high praise from Adam. So my original plan was to sell them on. Now I'm considering just refilling the whole whiskey cabinet with the range.
Excellent.
So Adam was like or Whiskymaker 1 was like an awakening for me, and agreed.
Nice.
James 5 is amazing. So massively high praise, which maybe brings us on to the bottle that you have that is if you're ready,
yes.
that is limited as upcoming release, but obviously we know now is the Lakes Infinity collection. While we actually pour that, I'll tell you the price of this, which I always forget to do. You'd swear I don't, I mean, I'm not really in sales, I'm going to say, but you know what I mean. It's where I can work for a shop. So Whiskymaker's number 5, which you'll get 50% off this price, is £70. So like, I mean, that's not bad if you think of the other whiskies that are in that kind of price point. I'm not going to say it's super cheap, but like, yeah, it's all relative, I suppose.
Yeah. You get a lot of bang for your buck at £60, and for a relatively young whiskey, that's, I think it's and relatively collectible as well. So yeah. But yeah, sorry. We're moving on to Infinity. So super exciting dram. So I think I've been speaking to some of the whiskey shops. I think it should be hitting the actual physical shops tomorrow, I believe. But I know it's available online. So a little bit of a kind of history or kind of understand, pour your dram and have a sniff and a chat and a drink of it if you want, but I'll talk a bit about the journey of the editions versus the reserve. So I think you have to kind of consider them in tangent with one another. So our reserve is our sherry-led house style. This is our calling card. This is what we do. It's our DNA. Whereas our editions are an opportunity for us to be, I want to say, more playful, but also more story-led. So the whole concept of this is very much our whiskey making team are considering a story first and then building a whiskey around that story. You may have been aware of previous releases. I've got some of the editions behind us. So we had our Forbidden Fruit, which was our exclusive launch to yourselves at the whiskey shop, which was fabulous and amazing and really, really interesting and complex. But we also did things like Lagute, which was very bourbon-led and very much influenced by kind of a concept of a French patisserie, for example. This one is Infinity. So go in, have a little taste. And the story behind this, and the whole idea of this is very much around an evolving flavour. So Davil and the whiskey making team, for them, this has been a massive labour of love for them over a long period of time. And for them, I think it's probably Davil's favourite whiskey he's ever created. And the whole idea around this is to create a whiskey where every time you go back, you get a different flavour. And the longer you leave it, it opens up and changes and evolves. And if you look at the image, it's kind of like an Escher painting. And it's like kind of you go up the stairs and then you back down again. That's the whole idea. And the whole concept of this is the idea is a kind of interconnectedness of the universe and the complexities of going back for more and finding something different and unlocking a different flavour. So the tasting notes are almost impossible to pinpoint. And we've been doing quite a few tastings with this, where literally you've got the opposite end of the spectrum of flavours that people are getting, or someone's trying it, 1 minute and then coming back 5 minutes later and getting something completely different. So for me, I get a really kind of toastiness about it. Kind of, toast for me comes really strong. There's a treacle of spiciness as well. But it's also really fragrant. Spicy fragrance, kind of Eastern kind of concepts come through really strong on the nose. I like that liquid parking. I think that's a really good shout, Craig. Yeah, absolutely get that.
Well, it's when you said French patisserie, that's what's been in my head with the custard, and I got that kind of mille-fili, or however you pronounce that. I can never pronounce that cake. But yeah, those kind of really interesting French patisserie kind of things, and and then as Kevin says, it's spicy, bold, wonderful. Save the American oak part. Hint of proper coca. French toast with cinnamon, treacle tart on the nose. Yeah, some fantastic liquid toffee and a bonfire night on the nose. Interesting.
Yeah. No, I love it. I love the breadth of flavors. You know, we're getting some people saying custard and French patisserie, and we're getting someone else going, you know, hot cocoa and parkin, which in theory you should never be able to drink the same whiskey and get those opposite flavors. And that's very much the idea with this. So that's it's great to actually see the tasting notes are so wacky, because that's absolutely where they were going. The whiskey making team were trying to find some of the rarest, most unusual casks, trying to blend those together, really heavily elevage it to create such a complexity of flavor. So in terms of cask influence, Oloroso influence very high, quite a lot of Palo Cortado, medium amount of Manzanilla, a little bit of Fino as well. So sherry, but a real mix of sherries in there to create that complexity.
No, there is a
joss sticks. I love that, Adam. Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, no, joss sticks. Yeah, that's a great. And Alan says got smoke at the end for the first time. Lovely, warm, spice tough and maca. Great depth, great dram. Viennese Christmas market in a glass, as Martin. And that's interesting. You know, when transported to location. I mean, I lived with a French chap. Really nice lad whose parents owned a French patisserie, and we used to call around there and get, you know, some sandwiches and some cakes and stuff, and this takes me back to that time in my life.
Brilliant, excellent.
Yeah. And how many bottles of Infinity have been made, says Adam Pickering rather than the other Adam.
We don't declare our bottle numbers. All of our editions are limited release. So all I'd say is go and get them while you can, because they won't be around for long. So yeah, without giving you any indication, you know, they're all out there in the open market now. So go grab them, because I know that some of our editions are going for silly money on the secondary market now. But not that I advocate that bottle flipping, but yeah, make sure you get in there now.
You're based in North Yorkshire, and the distilleries in
yes, in Cumbria. Yes,
in Cumbria.
Lakes,
yes.
And
I'm sure when you said we don't declare, I was trying to think of a good cricket joke to get in there, but yeah.
Yeah.
So Steph says mine's getting delivered tomorrow, and mine, says Adam. So Christmas spice, cloves and cinnamon is another tasting note from Kevin Wright. Yeah, and I'll definitely recommend getting this. Now, the only thing is, as this is such a new release off the shelves and only came out on Friday, we don't have the 15% discount code I'm going to give you now actually doesn't apply to the Infinity, but it applies to the first three we've tried. There was a question there about how much the Infinity is, and I will just confirm that. It's £95. So this one is a bit more expensive, but as was just hinted at by James, potentially more collectible. We'll see. So the discount code is WS15TLVT. So that's T for the, L for Lakes, and then VT for virtual tasting. So WS15TLVT. That is live now. I will type that into the chat box so that no one so that you can copy and paste that if you want, and it will also be in the email tomorrow with the recording. So yeah, that's fantastic. I mean, is there anyone else has any questions before we lose James? That would be great. And is there anything else you wanted to say to us before we finish up, James?
Nothing from me. I mean, it's been great to have you guys. I've absolutely loved the tasting notes. It's been fantastic to join you guys this evening. But if you have any questions, please feel free to stick them on there. I'll do my best to answer them, whether it's about any of these whiskies or the history of the distillery or any other questions. I'll do my best to answer. But no, it's been brilliant to join you and have a drink on a Monday night, which is what an absolute treat to have. I've had 4 drams on a Monday. I've got to work in the morning, so it's been brilliant.
Yeah. That's the no, it's actually been fantastic to see the turnout for the Monday tasting. We weren't sure. I mean, we've done one before, I think, that was not a Thursday, but normally they are a Thursday. Just by complete coincidence, our next tasting, which is going to go live hopefully later this week for sale, is going to be with, sorry for dropping another brand in here, James, but it's going to be released with Feather Kern. So that's
Nice distillery. I've visited. It's a lovely distillery.
It's a great distillery, and we've actually done them earlier this year. So there might be a few people on here thinking, "Oh, we've done them," but they've a couple of new releases out. So it'll be a bit different. And the one we did earlier this year sold out very fast. So we were just conscious that there will also be there was only 60 packs of the last one available, and it sold very fast. Whereas there's a lot more of this one. So people who might have missed out last time. We then after that will have tastings. I know some of you would have got an email. Potentially about some of the digital drams. That was more targeted at people who didn't participate in them. But so some of you might not. Don't worry if you missed out on the email. It was just kind of highlighting what we do here with digital drams. So upcoming, we will have ones with Deanston, a Diageo special release tasting. We will have a one from a New Zealand distillery, Cardona distillery, I think it's pronounced. There's gonna be loads more than that. There's a Waterford tasting potentially coming down the line, a Dunville's tasting, Irish, one of my favorite Irish whiskies. I don't know how many people on here have tried Dunville. So there's a lot coming between now and Christmas, now that it's getting darker earlier and people are kind of happier to be indoors in the evening. So stay tuned for the next few weeks for them coming live.
Amazing.
Let's see what
just as a quick shout out as well, by the way, we are going to be doing some sampling in some whiskey shop stores over the next couple of weeks. So we're in Manchester store on Thursday. I myself will be in York store on Friday of this week, and then a week on Friday I'll be in Newcastle. So I'm not sure if that's local to any of you, but do come along. You can try a dram. We'll bring a few other bits and bobs along as well. So if you are around about and in the north of England, then pop along and say hello.
No, 100%. And anyone who's when you sign up for the W Club, you select your nearest store on your account settings. So anyone who's near those stores should have gotten an email actually this afternoon about those. So if you're worried about times, it's not like a formal tasting. It is a sampling from 12 to 5. So there's no kind of idea. There's no need to be in there. But I believe Nottingham should be in there, Rosie.
We're not down in Nottingham, but I should probably arrange it. So I could definitely get down there.
We will get down to Nottingham. There's actually a different tasting email went out about Nottingham tastings. I think it was a Waterford maybe tonight. That's what confused me. Might see you Thursday. There's a comment in there, and great tasting night. Some great tasting. Actually, that's a good question before we finish up. Paul says 28 distilleries now in England. I think it's actually more than that, but can you tell us a bit about, before we finish, for anyone who's interested, about the English Whisky Guild and all that stuff that's been happening this year?
Yeah, I mean that for me is super exciting. So what we're doing in English whiskey is amazing. Now the English Whisky Guild has been set up. There's been, I think it's around 15 distilleries have signed up so far to agree a set of codes similar to what exists in Scotland around kind of what we define to be English whiskey. We're applying for a GI status to kind of classify what it means to be English whiskey. And I think that's really exciting, actually, that there is now a growing, I mean, there's some amazing whiskey coming out of England. I know, it's really exciting to see, and, not just ourselves, but, what's cropping up all over the place or all around the country, and to form the guild and some rules and boundaries and actually getting that GI status, I think it's really, really exciting. So yeah, looking forward to seeing what English whiskey is going to look like in the next 5, 10, 20 years time.
No, it is. It's great, and it gives it signals to the world that English whiskey has arrived. But also you do need some sort of controls and guidance on what goes on. I know, especially in Irish whiskey at the moment, for any of you into that, there's big controversy about the fact that technical file is too restrictive for such a rapidly growing industry and that, and I totally get that, but you do need some sort of agreed standard, because otherwise the whole game kind of falls apart. And we've seen that, for super whiskey nerds, you see that happen in the 19th century when it was the Wild West in whiskey, and so definitely. So I hope all the best to the English Whisky Guild.
Thanks. Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for your time, James, and thank you everyone for joining us and for all the questions. Anything we didn't get to, please email on. Either email info@the.club or Luke at Whisky Shop, and we'll get any questions answered for you. And so brilliant. So thanks for joining us, folks, and we'll catch you all again soon.
Absolute pleasure. Yeah, thank you very much. All the best. Cheers.
Thanks, James. We'll talk to you.
Cheers. Bye now.